The session today, we are talking about the criminal justice response to overcrowding in prisons. Now, in Pakistan, khas taur par, when we have looked at the history of Pakistan and the way the prison system is working, baar baar jo hum dekhte hain and nazar aata hai is that the capacity of the prisons is overshadowed and overwhelmed with the number of prisoners that we have. Now, इसके मसले क्या होते हैं, इसके long term impact क्या होता है, and why is this a problem, and what are the solutions is the main objective of today's session. So we are very honored to have an esteemed panel who I would like to introduce. First of all, we have Honourable Mr. Justice Ali Baqar Najafi. Justice Saab became an advocate in 1989 and then became an advocate of the High Courts in 1990. Apart from just being a brilliant lawyer, he has also worked as a researcher, as a teacher, teaching constitutional, international, Islamic, land and minor laws, has remained an editor of the news, as well as written many, many articles in magazines and newspapers. In addition to his very, very long and successful career as a lawyer, he finally joined the bench and became a judge of the Lahore High Court in 2012, where he has decided more than 18,000 cases on constitutional, civil, criminal, corporate, and banking customs. So, sir, we'd like to welcome you to today's session. Along with that, we have Mr. Qadeer Alam, who is currently Assistant Inspector General of the Prisons in Punjab. In addition to his work in the prisons, where he has remained superintendent of various prisons around Punjab, he has worked internationally in Liberia in the UN mission as a corrections advisor. And because that wasn't enough, he has also done an LLB and LLM in criminal law and justice from the University of Sussex and a PhD from Middlesex University. He currently works as EIG Prisons in Punjab and has also had several research publications in journals recognized by the HEC. And his latest talk is being published by the Oxford University. Ms. Sara Belal does not require much introduction because she is quite a personality in person as well as on media, and we keep seeing all of her work. She is the founder and executive director of Justice Project Pakistan. She has worked extensively, particularly for death row prisoners, has secured stays and executions of several death row prisoners, and highlighted the use of death penalty on national and international stage in Pakistan. She is a recipient of the 2016 Franco-German Human Rights Prize, awarded to only 16 human rights activists around the world, and she has won the prestigious Echoing Green Global Fellowship. In addition, she has studied history, and she is also a practicing barrister. Ms. Nekane Lavin is a human rights expert on the administration of justice at the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights, where she provides legal and technical advice on human rights issues related to detention and incarceration, access to justice, fair trial guarantees, and the abolition of the death penalty. Before joining the OHCHR in 2012, she worked on investigations at the International Criminal Court, the International Commission Against Impunity in Guatemala, and the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. She has conducted human rights monitoring visits in detention centers in various countries, including in the Democratic Republic of Congo and Venezuela, where she coordinated with the OHCHR Monitoring and Technical Assistance Program on the criminal justice system. And lastly, we have Ms. Robina Shaheen, who has personally been my mentor in working on, with victims of violence against women. She has worked for over 24 years with AGHS and the Dastak Shelter Home, where she was working directly, counseling, guiding, and making sure of the safety and protection of women in Dastak. She has worked for over 28 years in AGHS and has worked extremely closely with prisoners and prisons in Punjab. So to start off with this, AIG Saab, if I may request you, whether you'd like to sit here, to give an overall introduction to the prison system in Pakistan and some of the challenges we may face.
So good afternoon, everybody, and especially good afternoon to the Justice Sahab and all the distinguished guests and the participants. We have to follow this time restriction, so let me go straight to my topic, that is overcrowding in prisons. As far as the definition of the overcrowding, in terms of international standard, there is no prescribed or uniform definition about overcrowding. So the second important thing is criminal justice. And criminal justice composes 5 components. That is, first one is the police, the judiciary, and prosecution, prison, and probation and parole. And prison has very important role in criminal justice system, in how prison serves 2 basic purposes. The first one is hold the prisoners who are on physical remand, those who are on judicial remand, and the third one is when somebody is sentenced and convicted, he is kept inside the prison. And the duty of the prison is to reform and to rehabilitate the prisoner. When the prisoner go inside the society, he must not commit offense again. So prison plays important role to rule of law and important component of the criminal justice system. So now I come to this particular question of overcrowding in Pakistan rather than Punjab prisons. So my focus would be on Punjab prisons. So we, before I go to the Punjab prisons, let me just quickly to brief that overcrowding is a global phenomenon. The overcrowding is not an issue in Punjab or in Pakistan, but it is all over the world. Just I have brief statistics. And since 2000, there is a 24% increase in global prison populations. And it is 11.5 million numbers of people are inside the jails in the world. And if I do the breakup, so the maximum number is 2 million in the United States and 1.69 million in China and in Brazil. And it would be a surprising fact for you that Europe, those countries are in Europe, their prison population has been decreased by 27%. It is the only continent in the world which saw a decrease in prison population. So in our neighbor, India, again saw a significant increase in prison population, that is a 14% in the last 2 years. And in Turkey, there is a 130% increase in prison population in the last 10 years. So now I come to the particularly Punjab. Currently, in Punjab, we have 55,000 prisoners against the authorized capacity of 36,000 prisoners. So if we do the breakup, so this is a 38,000 prisoners are under trial. I repeat, out of 55,000, 38,000 are under trial prisoners, 14,000 are the convict prisoners, and 255 are the condemned prisoners, and almost 2,000 are UCCP. And UCCP mean unconfirmed prisoners, unconfirmed condemned prisoners, mean those prisoners whose appeals are pending with High Court. So this figure of 55,000 include almost 800 juveniles and 937 female prisoners. So what the Punjab prison has done to reduce the overcrowding? The first step is obviously that the construction of the jails and the construction of the new barracks and the cells. So in 1947, we have only 19 jails. We inherited only 19 jails. In 2015, we have 32 jails with the authorized capacity of 21,000. And currently, we have 43 jails. And since 2015 to up till now, there is addition of 12 jails with authorized capacity of 16,000. And now, overall percentage of overcrowding in Punjab prison is just 40%. This is one of the contribution, one of the positive things of the Punjab prisons. So, beside constructing the jails, we have other steps as well. The first one is the release of the prisoner on the visit of the district and session judge. Then there is a release of the prisoner on the parole. Currently, we have 800 prisoners on parole. And the third one is through award of remissions. We have the three kinds of the remission. The first one is called the ordinary remission, and education remissions, and then we have a special remission. So because there's a shortage of time, so I'm not going to explain what is ordinary or special remission. So then there is a payment of fines and qisas, diyat, of arsh, daman and diyat. So those prisoners who are confined in lieu of fines, so Punjab prison have arranged their their financial penalties with the collaboration of philanthropists. So now I come to the issues and the challenges. The first important thing is uh, we have reduced the overcrowding to 40%. But there are certain jails in Punjab, they have almost 200% overcrowding. When we analyze jail-wise, so the highest overcrowding is at Central Jail Rawalpindi and Sialkot, District Jail Shahpur, District Jail Kasur, and Central Jail Gujranwala. We have to find out the solution of these prisoners, especially Central Jail Rawalpindi. The authorized capacity is 2,000 prisoners, and against this we have the 6,000 prisoners are there. So what the federal government is doing to construct a jail, a model jail in Islamabad, and I hope it will be, this project will be completed in a couple of years. So as I have mentioned, the statistics of Punjab prison, 38,000 prisoners are under trial. If we have to make the strategy to reduce the overcrowding, then we have to work over to reduce the number of under trial prisoners. So if we go through this national judicial policy, 2009 and 12, it has given a comprehensive roadmap how to reduce the number of under trial prisoners in jails. One of them is to exercise the power of the bail, and the second one is the implementation of the timeline to the by the court. Mean that that policy says there is a certain timeline to decide our cases. So I think if our courts are going to implement that guideline, the number of under trial prisoners would be reduced significantly. Then if there are some steps, especially that has been taken by our neighbor country, India. They have fixed the terms. Let's say the prisoner have spent more than half time of the sentence, which is in which he is charged with, he should be released. And Sierra Leone has adopted, there's a success story which I am sharing, has adopted the system of paralegals. And the paralegal is, they help to prepare the under trial prisoner to prepare their cases and to file the bail in the trial court. At the same time, we have the prison, this Punjab Legal Aid Agency Act. If the Punjab Legal Aid Agency is become functional, so there will be a great, significant contribution in pro bono in Punjab. The next step, which is the alternative to imprisonment. This is a very popular thing, and we have probationer parole in our system. But between the probationer parole and the prison, there is a next thing, is another thing, something that is called intermediate sanctions. So intermediate sanction include intensive probation supervision, house arrest, electronic monitoring, institution orders, split sentences, and restitution or residential community corrections. So these can be incorporated on our criminal justice system. The one more thing, in Punjab prisons we have almost 7,000 to 8,000 prisoners who are involved in drug addiction cases. And we have the law, CNSA, you know, everybody I think under this roof, Control of Narcotic Substance Act 1997. So it's section 52 that held responsible the government, the provincial government, to register the drug addicts. And also further it obligates the government to establish rehabilitation center. If the section 52 and 53 of CNSA is implemented, the prison population can be reduced up to 7 to 8,000 in Punjab prisons. So what I conclude, though my conclusion is this construction of prisons is a one main solution to the problem. It is not a comprehensive solution. So prisons is an important component of criminal justice system, and overcrowding is the problem of the prison. And this can be addressed with the comprehensive and inclusive approach. And it is mentioned in Sustainable Development Goal 16 of the United Nations. So we have to adopt a comprehensive approach, including police, judiciary, prison, prosecution, and parole. And the last thing is, we have to introduce, rather have to adopt, have to use the technology, especially in case of effective file management and video link trial, to reduce under trial population, which is a 38,000 out of 55,000 in Punjab prisons. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saab. I know that when we were planning for this session, it was very hard to contain so much information into a 10-minute presentation, and I really do appreciate it. I'd actually like to ask Robina. Robina, overcrowding की हम बहुत बात करते हैं. Now, overcrowding to a point कि it becomes a term, कि एक अल्फाज बन जाता है. लेकिन आपने जो इतने सालों से काम किया है prisons में, can you tell us what that actually means in terms of reality? A descriptive analysis, what does it really do for the prisoners, and why is it such a big problem for the prison population?
थैंक यू वेरी मच मलिहा. सबसे पहले मैं बात करूंगी कि जो सूबा पंजाब है, इसमें कुल 43 जेलें हैं, जिसमें 27 डिस्ट्रिक्ट जेल हैं और 9 सेंट्रल जेलें हैं, 2 और उसके अलावा दीगर 7 जेलें हैं, जिनमें बोस्टल जेल है, उसके अलावा सब जेल हैं और एक ख़वातीन की जेल है. ये सारी जेलें जो हैं कैद खाना जात, कानून कैद खाना जात के हवाले से दर्ज क़वाद ज़वाबित के तहत काम करती हैं और मुख्तलिफ़ औक़ात में कैदियों को ज़रूरतों को देखते हुए इस कानून में तरमीम भी की गई. जेल मैं ये बताना ज़्यादा ज़रूरी समझती हूँ कुछ चीज़ें कि जो शहरों में या शहर से नज़दीक वाक़या जेलें हैं, ये निस्बतन इसमें ज़्यादा सहूलतें फ़राहम की जाती है निस्बतन वो जेलों के जो कि शहर से बाहर है, वहाँ पर जो है सहूलतों का फुकदान है. अगर हम सबसे पहले बात करेंगे कि जेलों में जो ओवर क्राउडिंग के हवाले से मसाइल हैं, उसमें हम 3 हवालों से बात करेंगे. एक तो उनकी सिक्योरिटी के हवाले से और उनकी सेहत के हवाले से, और दूसरी बात यह है कि कैसे इसको ओवरकम करने की कोशिश की जा सकती है. इस वक्त हम बात करेंगे कि सबसे बड़ा जो जेलों का मसला है वो ओवर पॉपुलेशन का है. इस वक्त पंजाब की जेलों में कुल गुंजाइश से 35% ज़्यादा कैदी मौजूद हैं, जैसा कि इन्होंने भी एक फ़िगर दिया है, लेकिन मेरे पास जो फ़िगर है उस हवाले से भी मैं बात करूँगी कि इस वक्त जेलों में 36,805 कैदियों को रखने की कैपेसिटी है, जबकि इस वक्त जेलों में 54,597 कैदी मौजूद हैं. जेलों में जो इतनी ज़्यादा कैदी मौजूद होने की वजह से उनकी फ़लाह बहबूद और बेहतरी के लिए जो काम शुरू किए जाते हैं उन पे मनफी असरात मुरतब होते हैं. और ये बात पूरी तरह आया है कि जेलों में कैदियों की गुंजाइश से ज़्यादा की तादाद वहाँ पर मौजूद कैदियों की बजाय हवालाती होते हैं. मुकदमा में ताख़ीर, पैरोल सिस्टम का ना होना और ज़मानत के पेचीदा कवानीन भी इसकी बड़ी वजूहात हैं. दीगर वजूहात में केस की पैरवी करने के लिए कोई नहीं होता. उसके अलावा अर्श और दामाद के कैदी जो हैं वो अंदर हैं. जज साहिबान की तादाद कम और काम का बर्डन ज़्यादा भी इसकी वजूहात हैं. माज़रत के साथ वकला की हड़तालें भी एक बड़ी वजह है, क्योंकि कैदी हमें कई दफ़ा इसकी बात कहते हैं कि जनाब हम यहाँ से चले गए, लेकिन वहाँ जाके पता चला कि जनाब हड़ताल है, तो हमारी एक डेट आज के दिन हमारी ज़मानत हो जानी थी, लेकिन इस वजह से नहीं हो सकी. चालान उनके लेट आते हैं, एक वजह ये भी है उनकी. उसके अलावा जिस वक्त हम सिक्योरिटी के हवाले से बात करेंगे کریں گے جیلوں میں کم جگہ اور زیادہ قیدیوں کی موجودگی میں حفاظتی اقدامات کو برقرار رکھنا مشکل ہو جاتا ہے۔ کم جگہ پر زیادہ قیدیوں کی موجودگی از خود ان قیدیوں کے لیے بھی خطرہ ہے۔ گنجائش سے زیادہ قیدی اور محدود عملہ ہونے کی وجہ سے قیدیوں کی عدالت میں آمد و رفت کی وجہ سے حفاظتی اقدامات اور انتظامی امور متاثر ہوتے ہیں، جو انتظامات جیل اتھارٹی کی طرف سے کیے جاتے ہیں اور ان کی بہتری کے لیے کیے جانے چاہیے اور کیے جاتے ہیں، لیکن جیلوں میں زیادہ تعداد میں قیدی ہونے کی وجہ سے وہ اس طرح اس کے اوپر عمل درآمد نہیں ہو سکتا۔ اس کے بعد ہم آئیں گے ان کی صحت کے حوالے سے۔ پنجاب کی جیلوں میں حکومت کی طرف سے فراہم کردہ طبی سہولتیں کم ہیں، جن کی وجہ سے قیدی انتہائی مشکل کا شکار ہیں۔ عام طور پر جیلوں میں مہیا کیے جانے والی صحت کی سہولتیں ناکافی ہیں۔ جیلوں میں قیدیوں کی ایک بڑی تعداد ٹی بی اور ہیپاٹائٹس جیسی موذی امراض میں مبتلا ہے۔ قیدیوں میں سارا سال اور عام پائے جانے والی بیماری خارش ہے، جو کہ گندگی اور غلاظت کی وجہ سے پھیلتی ہے۔ سینٹرل جیلوں میں ہسپتال اور ڈاکٹرز جیسی سہولتیں موجود ہیں، مگر اس کے باوجود متعلقہ بیماری کی دوائی دستیاب کم ہوتی ہے۔ اس کے علاوہ جو ابھی یہاں پہ ذکر ہو رہا تھا کہ جو نشہ کرتے ہیں یا پاگل ہیں، میں نے 28 سال سے میں جیل کا وزٹ کر رہی ہوں، اور میری جو مشاہدے میں ایک چیز آئی ہے کہ وہاں پر کافی نشے کے عادی لوگ ہوتے ہیں اور اس کے علاوہ پاگل لوگ بھی ہوتے ہیں۔ نشئی اور پاگل افراد کو جیل کی بجائے متعلقہ امراض پر کام کرنے والے اداروں میں بھیجنے کی ضرورت ہے، کیونکہ نشہ نہ ملنے کی وجہ سے کئی قیدی یا تو خود کو زخمی کر لیتے ہیں یا وہ کئی دفعہ ایکسپائر ہو جاتے ہیں۔ جس وقت ہم لوگوں نے جیل کا وزٹ کیا تو اکثر بچوں اور عورتوں اور قیدیوں کے جسم پہ زخموں کے نشان تھے، جیسے کٹ لگے ہوئے ہیں۔ تو ہم نے ان سے پوچھا تو انہوں نے کہا نشے کی طلب نہ پوری ہونے کی وجہ سے قیدی خود کو کاٹ لیتے ہیں۔ جیلوں میں اکثر سائیکالوجسٹ نہیں ہیں، جو اکثر مطلب کئی جیلوں میں نہیں ہے لیکن زیادہ تر ہے، نفسیاتی دباؤ میں قیدیوں کا علاج کر سکے۔ تو ذہنی مریضوں کی جو حالت ہے، جن کو اداروں میں ہونا چاہیے اور وہ جیلوں میں ہے، تو ان کی حالت بگڑتی چلی جاتی ہے۔ جو متعدی بیماریاں ہیں اور انفیکشن پھیلنے کی بڑی وجہ جیل میں موجود قیدیوں کی تعداد کا زیادہ ہونا ہے، کیونکہ جب وہ بیماریاں جو کہ ایک سے دوسرے کو لگ سکتی ہیں، تو ایک ہی بیرک میں جب اس بیرک کی کیپیسٹی سے زیادہ لوگ ہوں گے تو وہ بیماری ایک سے دوسرے اور دوسرے کو تیسرے کو آسانی سے پھیلتی چلی جاتی ہے۔ اس کے علاوہ یہ ہے کہ قیدی نہانے کے پانی اور صفائی کی دیگر سہولتیں دستیاب نہ ہونے کی وجہ سے جلدی اور دوسری بیماریوں کا شکار ہوتے ہیں۔ گرمی کے موسم میں خصوصاً بچوں اور عورتوں میں جلد کی بیماریاں پائی جاتی ہیں۔ جیلوں میں بیماریوں کی ایک بڑی وجہ جو ہے وہ بیرکس کے اندر باتھ روم کا ہونا ہے، کیونکہ میں نے خود آبزرو کیا کہ یہ باتھ روم کئی دفعہ بہت گندے ہوتے ہیں، اور اس کی گندگی کی بڑی وجہ یہ ہے کہ سیوریج کا نظام جو ہے ناقص ہے، پرانی پائپ لائنز ہیں اور وہ کئی دفعہ بند ہوتی ہیں، تو وہ جو ایک اسمیل اور جو بو اور جو جراثیم کی قیدیوں تک رسائی ہے وہ بہت آسان ہے۔ اچھا، یہ صورتحال وہاں زیادہ مزید خراب ہو جاتی ہے، جہاں ماؤں کے ساتھ بچے بھی وہ مجبوراً قید کاٹ رہے ہوتے ہیں، اور بچے چونکہ زیادہ جلدی بیماری اور جراثیم کو آبزارب کر لیتے ہیں، تو اس وجہ سے یہ سہولت یہ مسائل ان کے ساتھ زیادہ ہوتے ہیں۔ موسمی تبدیلیوں سے نمٹنے کے لیے جیل انتظامیہ کے پاس مناسب انتظامات نہیں ہوتے، جس وجہ سے قیدی ان موسمی تبدیلیوں کے باعث مختلف بیماریوں کا شکار ہوتے ہیں۔ اکثر جیلوں میں بچوں کو جرم اور عمر کے لحاظ سے علیحدہ قید نہیں کیا جاتا، جس وجہ سے نابالغ قیدی بچوں جو چھوٹے بچے ہیں وہ بڑے قیدی بچوں کی طرف سے مار پیٹ اور ہراساں کیے جانے کا انہیں سامنا رہتا ہے۔ اس وقت ہم لوگ اس کے علاوہ بات کرنا چاہوں گی خواتین کے حوالے سے کہ ہماری جیلوں میں جو بچیاں ہیں جن کو ہم جوینائل کنسیڈر کرتے ہیں، ان کے لیے کوئی انتظامات نہیں ہیں، اور یہ کافی مایوس کن صورتحال ہوتی ہے، جبکہ ہماری جیلوں میں لڑکوں کے لیے جوینائل سیکشن موجود ہے لیکن لڑکیوں کے لیے جوینائل سیکشن کوئی موجود نہیں ہے۔ تو اس کے علاوہ دوسری میں یہ بات کرنا چاہوں گی کہ جیلوں میں ٹرانسجینڈر کے لیے بھی کوئی انتظام نہیں ہے۔
تھینک یو سو مچ۔ آئی تھنک کہ یہ بہت ضروری بات تھی کرنا، کہ ایک جو انڈرسٹینڈنگ، کہ ایک تو ہم ایکیڈیمک ورڈز، لینگویج، اٹس ویری امپورٹنٹ ٹو انڈرسٹینڈ کہ اصلیت کیا ہوتی ہے، اس کے کیا امپیکٹ ہے آن گراؤنڈ۔ So, Ms. Lavin, I'd like to turn to you now and ask you, okay, as the AIG mentioned, Dr. AIG, I don't know how to put the two titles together, that overcrowding is an international issue. So, looking at it from an international perspective, what is the current situation? What have some of the things that have worked, and what has not worked? And any advice that you might have for Pakistan. So, over to you.
Thank you, and good afternoon. As Mr. Qadeer Alam has very knowledgeably noted, prison overcrowding is a major challenge faced by criminal justice systems around the globe. It's not a phenomenon that occurs only in Pakistan. 110 out of the 193 member states of the United Nations are affected by prison overcrowding. More than 50 states are operating prison services at more than 150% of their capacity. As Mr. Qadeer Alam has noted, in 2019, more than 11 million people, including 410,000 children, were held in prisons across the globe, representing an increase of 25% since 2000. While the number of women in incarceration represent a small minority of the prison population, their numbers grew by 50% over the same period, reaching more than 714,000 women. The number of individuals convicted for drug-related offenses, a phenomenon that Mr. Qadeer Alam also has highlighted, is estimated to account for 18% of the global prison population, and the proportion of women, 35%, imprisoned for drug-related offenses is higher than that of men, 19%. A main contributor to prison overcrowding is the excessive resort to pretrial detention, what is called under-trial detention in Pakistan. Under-trial detainees around the globe outnumber convicted prisoners in 45 states of the world. In 14 of those states, pretrial or under-trial detainees represent more than 70% of the prison population. Even though many individuals charged with criminal offenses do not pose a risk to public safety or the administration of justice, their number among the prison population has risen by 30% since 2000 to more than 3 million people. Mrs. Robina Shaheen, she has very eloquently illustrated how prison overcrowding constitutes an acute global human rights, health and security crisis, and stands out as the greatest contributor to violations of international minimum standards in prisons. Incarceration reflects and reinforces socio-economic inequalities and intersecting forms of discrimination within societies. The result is the overrepresentation of minority and marginalized groups among prisoners, many of whom are charged with petty and non-violent offenses. Individuals may also be deprived of liberty for crimes linked to discrimination against women and lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or intersex persons. Children may be deprived of liberty for non-criminal acts as a substitute for referral to childcare and protection services that might be lacking. Persons with psychosocial or intellectual disabilities are also often imprisoned owing to a lack of community-based support and public healthcare facilities. Those detained for drug-related offenses are also often low-level offenders, such as persons who use drugs, drug couriers, or small-scale dealers. Prior to any decision to expand prison capacity, states that are confronted with prison overcrowding should first explore and exhaust opportunities to reduce the prison population, and then conduct a comprehensive and realistic assessment of remaining needs. Apart from strengthening prison management and improving prison conditions and advancing the rehabilitation and social integration of offenders, priority should be given to shifting policies towards crime prevention and alternatives to imprisonment. The focus on criminal justice responses should be shifted to investing in longer-term strategies for crime prevention, rehabilitation, restorative justice, and social reintegration, with an emphasis on the most vulnerable. This shift also requires a movement towards depenalization and decriminalization in appropriate cases, in line with international norms and standards. The effective use of alternatives to incarceration, also noted by Mr. Qadeer Alam in his eloquent presentation, is another precondition to reduce prison populations. Concrete measures may include at the pre-trial stage, for example, diversion or discharge, including conditional discharge. At the trial stage, we could have status penalties, economic sanctions, restitution or compensation orders, suspended sentences, probation, and judicial supervision, among others. And at the post-sentencing stage, we can also count on measures such as halfway houses or various forms of parole and pardoning schemes. Non-custodial measures tend to be more cost-effective and are a more proportionate and humane criminal justice response in appropriate cases. However, non-custodial measures require sufficient physical infrastructure and resources, including for probation and parole agencies, social services, and civil society organizations, in order to be functional and effective. In order to reduce the overuse and excessive lengths of pretrial detention and address procedural delays, case backlogs, and miscarriages of justice, it is crucial to build the capacity of criminal justice actors, improve interagency cooperation, simplify and speed up criminal justice procedures, and improve data management systems and other infrastructure. Early access to effective legal aid is also crucial for those detained to challenge their conditions of detention. And regular monitoring by inspections by the prison service and by external independent bodies is also key to prevent torture and ill-treatment. I'll briefly address the situation of women and children also deprived of liberty, because additional consideration should be given to gender-responsive prison design, management practices, and non-custodial measures for women offenders, taking into account their specific circumstances, the often non-violent nature of the offenses women commit, and any wrongful criminalization. And regarding children, the best interest of the child should also be a priority in all actions that affect them. In the case of child offenders, all efforts should be made to resort to diversion, other non-custodial measures, and restorative justice, regardless of their alleged associations and offenses. All these are recommendations that are promoted and supported by the United Nations Common System. There's a position that they've come together on incarceration as a response to the plight of persons deprived of liberty during the COVID pandemic. At the time, many states around the world decided to adopt release measures to reduce prison populations with very positive results. So linking these efforts with the Sustainable Development Agenda, we are really supporting countries to achieve implementation of SDG 16 with a specific indicator on pretrial detention as a basic element on accessing to justice. And all these efforts and recommendations should be guided by international human rights law, including the Mandela Rules, Bangkok Rules, and Tokyo Rules. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lavin, for the international view and some excellent recommendations from the international community. We've gotten examples from internationally. AIG Saab has mentioned some excellent initiatives in Punjab. We have examples from Sindh, where we have prison paralegals, we have lots of probation and diversion, and in Islamabad, which is now looking at alternative dispute resolutions to reduce trials and then therefore obviously reduce possibilities of incarceration. Looking at the Pakistan legal framework and structure, where do you think are the problems? Where do you think are the solutions? What has gone wrong? Why have we increased prisoners instead of decreasing them when so many of these things are in place as well?
I think you asked a really good question, and I think first I want to appreciate your guys' work in Karachi, because I think Legal Aid Society does some excellent work, and obviously I'd want to appreciate AGHS's and HRCP's long-standing work on prisons. It's what we learned from at JPP. I think we're all talking about great ideas, but when we look at, I think there are two things that I think one must understand when we talk about the history of prisons in Pakistan. Number one, the history of prisons in Pakistan is not a federal history. It's a very provincial history. And the state of each province's prisons, and the evolution of each province's prisons, who is in that prison, what is being criminalized, what are the facilities, and what are the remedies, are all kind of deeply rooted in our history. And that history begins from I'm not just talking about pre-partition or the formation of Pakistan times, I'm talking about it evolved primarily and it's rooted in colonial times. And we just recently published a book on prisons, which looks at each province's history in the context of its prisons. The reason I say that is partly because I'm a history major before I was a lawyer. And I think that when you get a good hold on history, you can actually devise better strategy. In that book, when we looked at the statistics and the historical perspective and the anthropological and socio-political context of each province, what we found was that today, and predominantly in Punjab, today you see the criminalization of diversity. In Sindh, we see criminalization of ethnic diversity as subnationalism. In KP, we see the criminalization of dissent as militancy. In Balochistan, we see the criminalization of disenfranchisement as separatism, right? Again, these are not just like partition histories, these are pre-partition histories. This is how the colonial lens saw people in that province, and this is how they lay down. Now, who is in our prisons today and how are they treated is demonstrated, and it's kind of engulfed in the prison rules. You know, we talk on, and I'm talking to you out of frustration of many years of being on various committees, federal and provincial, like our colleagues have been. And I think the last committee that I've been on, I've just literally stopped. Because I feel like, well, not I feel like, I know that in prison reform, whether it's data, whether it's anecdotes, whether it's experience, there have been 1 million publications under every administration, under every high court, under every provincial administration. There has been a committee on prison reforms. And you know, when we started to thinking about writing a book, the first thing we noticed was, I don't think we need to write a book, we just need to publish a bibliography, because there were thousands of reports. And so the last committee that we were a part of, we literally went and we said, they said, what are your recommendations? And we said, well, there's 75 years of recommendations. And primary amongst them has to be that you have to reform the prison rules. Punjab has the largest prison population of Pakistan. It has the most amount of jails. It has the most resources to tackle it. Punjab is the only province that has not reformed its prison rules. Punjab is sitting on a set of draft rules that are the most expansive, in line with all the international conventions, done with all of the stakeholders present. The Law Ministry, the Advocate General's Office, the Prisons Department, the Health Department, the Home Department, all of them together. We are not here to talk about anything else, any reform, until we speak about changing the DNA of how Punjab prisons operates. That has to be number one. And any discussion otherwise is a waste of time. It's a waste of my time as an activist. It's a waste of the government's time. And the reason I'm saying this, I'm clearly frustrated after many years of being on these committees. My advice to all of the fellow activists here would be simple in some ways. I think, and I see this, and I'm very glad you guys took away my first point, which was that I think we need to rely on data and look at the data just apart from the top surface level data, but really go in and analyze it. Because the stories on how to convince the administration comes from the data, whether it's the court or the administration, especially when we're talking about capacity issues, right? I can give you stats on overall prison population in Pakistan, 135%. But when you go down to the provincial level and you see the difference, right? For example, Punjab's overcrowding is at a different level than Sindh's overcrowding. The next question to ask is, well, who's in those prisons, right? Punjab's just talking about, look how much money they have, right? Because you're building new prisons all the time. My question is, who's being criminalized in Punjab, right? And when we looked at those rates of criminalization, we found that it's, and another strategy, again, the strategy that we are going to be pushing for in the next coming years is the decriminalization of poverty. Because when we went down into the nitty-gritty and looked at who is in prison and what are they for, we were able to look beyond the overcrowding stat, right, which is 135% national, and it's at Zile. My data person is sitting there. She's going to throw a shoe at me if I get this wrong. You know, under trial is 68% in Punjab. It's 77% in Sindh. It's 80% in KP. This didn't mean that much to me. And my challenge to Zile and our data team was tell me more, right? Who are these people? And what we found was, it was in the last, for that we needed to go to the Punjab police, right? They do publish their figures. 41,837 arrests in Punjab alone for crimes of begging, water theft, kite flying, sound system violations, and the Smoking Act. Just to give you an example. These people do not belong in prison. Like you mentioned, they belong in other, we need to decriminalize poverty as a first attempt, and we need to bring in actors apart from just the poor Punjab Prisons Department, right? The health department has a role to play. The police department has a huge role to play. The psychiatrists have a huge role to play. So we need to look outside of the usual suspects to bring about change. The other thing I'm going to just say, and then I'm ending, is that, and this is just an advice from what I've learned and what we've learned from dealing with many, many, many governments and many committees, which is, I think it helps in the long term when you're dealing with the state. And again, we've seen many versions of the state coming up again and again. I mean, I've lost count of how many governments have been in Punjab. Somebody asked me recently, how many governments ago was this? And I said, I'll tell you how many years ago this was, because that's a simpler question to answer than governments. Is that be technical and be non-political. My politics begins and ends with the people that I represent. Those are the prisoners of Pakistan, at home and abroad. This might be the very wrong forum to say it. I'm not talking about your personal politics. I'm talking about my politics as, you know, the executive director of an organization that deals with any and every government to advise them on strategies of political reform, unless they know that, I mean, I have a lot of personal politics. Those belong in my personal arena, not on my social media. And the last thing I was going to say is that, you know, we need to engage with the various governments and the courts, by the way, on sticking to and getting the government to publish their data so that we can analyze it. Finally, we cannot talk about prison reforms or prison overcrowding or any of these issues without talking about accountability and an independent accountability mechanism. And the latest thing that JPP is pushing for is a tribunal, a prisons tribunal in Punjab that would be based in each of the each of the 9 divisions as a go-between between the courts, the High Court, and as a means where the prison rules could be applied, both for service matters and for prisoners. They can represent themselves there. They don't need to engage lawyers. Lawyers find it easier to go there as well. So we're trying to think out of the box, because either the government should be implementing the 75 years of recommendations, or they should be looking at the data to devise strategy, or they should be, you know, or we should be suggesting to change the system, because the current system and the legal framework as it works, beginning with the prison rules, does not work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I think that you raised some very, very important points, particularly when we talk about decriminalization and the need for a multi-sectoral approach towards prisons. I think apart from, and it still haunts me when you talk about begging, because my organization works with prisons in Sindh, and when they did an anti-begging drive, we had children as young as 5-year-olds sitting in prisons with us while we were trying to arrange their bail. You know, so there are lots of horrific images that come up with that. But in addition to just the criminalization of poverty, where it comes from begging or stealing, or why they're stealing, and stealing generators, water, food, it also comes off increasing higher penalties. So we have in Pakistan, just to add in my 2 bits as a moderator and taking advantage of the mic, I apologize, just to sub as the next speaker. But when we increase penalties, you decrease the chances of bail as well, and the higher the potential liability is, the higher the chances of them as being continuing as under trial prisoners as well. So I think that it also, we have to look at the entire criminalization model that we do follow in Pakistan, and look at the alternatives, many of which the AIG has also mentioned, and as have others. With this, Justice Saab, I'd like to turn to you. Keeping in mind that every single panelist has discussed the need for a multi-sectoral approach, and as at the head of the justice sector, with the judiciary being the head, what would be your views or your feedback or your thoughts on all of this?
Thank you very much for providing me this opportunity. First of all, my congratulations to Moneza Jahangir and Sulema Jahangir, the two daughters of Ms. Asma Jalani, the great activist of all times. She has started all this, activity of providing the justice to the vulnerable people, and my specific topic is the jail, and in which she has worked so much, and now after her entire team, I must congratulate your team as well for carrying on her mission. I think Dr. Qadeer has very ably and emphasized upon the different steps taken inside Punjab for the improvement of the jails. And our next speaker, Ms. Robina, has also emphasized her experience for the, she has been working in the jail. Ms. Lavin has also given the international perspective, and Sarah Belal, as the leader of JPP, has also given, very important input in all discussions, and of course, they are very valuable. Taking the advantage of some of the lawyers present in the hall, and I accept the responsibility and confess before this audience that the judicial custody has to be regulated by the courts. If the prisoner is convicted, or if a prisoner is under trial prisoner, or some other kind of prisoner, its well-being, his well-being and his proper provision of the and protection of the fundamental right of inviolability of dignity of man is the responsibility of the judiciary. And how can we fulfill the responsibility? I think this is also my area of interest, in which I would like the audience to participate and to put their ingress inside. A lot has been talked about the capacity of the courts. Lot have been talked about the mechanism, the functioning of the courts. Perhaps that is not up to the level of the common man, because if the person is languishing in jail for months and months and years, owing to the fact that decision is not timely made, those factors, I think, is my concern. We have to, follow the ethics of the professions, and that we do all the time. But with the passage of time, they all keep on, improving and, keep on developing in a positive way. And let's talk about that, okay, if you want to follow the strike culture, which I think recently, in the recent past, has declined to a great extent, for which the appreciation must be extended to the bar associations and the learned bar members also. But if you have to, if under compelling circumstances, if you had to do it, then why don't extend those strikes culture to the cases in which the detention is the subject matter, for the trials and for the bails and things like that? Because there are other cases also in which you can, register your protest and all the time. And then secondly, how to increase the capacity of the judges. Obviously, increasing number of judges is one part of the area. The other is to train them to the maximum to tackle with the situation is another part of the area. And I think the third, which has been pointed out, was the introduction of the modern techniques in disposing of the cases. To introduce the video conferencing, video linking, and audio input, audio conferencing, things like that. Because that will, save the time of the courts, and also help decide cases earliest. And thereafter, I think one thing I must share with you, that in the recently, I think about a month ago, the High Court has issued a notification throughout Punjab, according to which all the district and session judges have to carry out the inspection twice a month. And that SOP of the resume has been developed on the basis of the recommendations made by the NGMC and various fora like this Asma Jangie's conference on last year and as before that. So that has encompassed the recent judgment in which Ms. Sara Belal was a counsel, in which the mentally retarded prisoners were focused on. So that has also been incorporated. So here onward, that is, I think, one ought to share with you that in the jails, these will be followed. As far as the reduction of the prison jail is concerned, what is our responsibility? I have just shared. The other is that, we have, and I think very rightly pointed out by Ms. Sara, that we have to see what type of prisons are coming in. I'm sure they must be coming in from the vulnerable spectrum of the society. गरीब लोग, नादार लोग, जिनकी कोई आम किस्म की petty crimes में they were involved and then was sent to the jails. So we have to segregate those prisoners, I mean, on the basis of their crime which they have committed. And of course, the approach will be obviously different. But if you can share the data, I think that will help us to understand the issue. Another important point I want to point out is that, many conferences we have been discussing these, giving these recommendations and things like that. All the just आपने बताया कि all things are, data is full of the literature is available on the prison reforms and all that thing. But how to follow it, how to implement it? I think this is very important because in the last Asma Jangie's conference, if something was recommended, this was the time to show to the audience and to the public that okay, what we recommended on a year back has been followed to this extent. And from here onward, this recommendation will further be implemented. And I think those who are the responsible to implement those consensus things which for which we have no difference. And thank you very much, audience. This is a apolitical gathering, I think, in which we can talk our heart out and we can discuss that, okay, last conference में जो कुछ हमने recommendations या resolution दिया था, उसका follow हमें मज़ीद आगे क्या करना है. And as far as this topic is concerned, I'm sure that on the live discussion also, last year also would have been said, which has to be followed thoroughly. Thank you very much for providing us an opportunity. If there's any question, we are all here.
Thank you so much, Justice Saab. I think we have time for, let's start with 2 questions and then we'll see how time takes us, sir.
My name is Dr. Azif Chanar. I'm a medical doctor and a public health professional. At the same time, I'm a psychologist, I'm a criminologist, and I'm an international relation expert. At the same time, I'm a writer. Indeed, the topic is very interesting regarding the prison reforms and regarding all the activities and the discussions we are doing. As a medical professional, I want to just share an important thing, that there is no gene for crime. We have 46 genes, but there is no gene for crime, right? And the 3 C's are important. Number 1, crime. Number 2, courts. And number 3, corrections, means prisons. If we want to just improve the population of the prisons, we must consider number C1, crime. As you mentioned, as the lady mentioned, that there are different stakeholders who are going to play an active role in the prevention of crimes like police, health, society. An important thing is that community watch. It is very important to reducing the crime rate. So I want to ask Miss, what is the outcome of stay in a prison on the crimes and the criminals? How much the prisons, they are playing their role in reducing the crime rate?
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. This is
Does
my
anyone
question.
else have another question?
My question is regarding the discrimination that is faced by prisoners at the hands of the police officers and the prison custodians and the officials who are in the prison. So what is being done to counter that sort of discrimination that the prisoners face from the system itself?
Okay, thank you so much. Ms. Lavin, if you can answer.
Thank you for the question. I mean, it's a very valid point, but I want to clarify that, I mean, the UN system's position on incarceration, which is promoting alternatives to incarceration, is not denying the function of incarceration as a punishment for certain offenses. It's just based on research that shows that many of those that are imprisoned are in pretrial detention for alleged offenses that are not grave crimes, that constitute petty crimes and non-violent crimes, as those reflected in Sarah Belal's presentation. So the focus is on how to reduce in that prison overcrowding, which is based mainly on pretrial detention, when the principle of liberty and security of the person should be the general principle that should be respected by the criminal justice system. And only when the crime is investigated, prosecuted, and sanctioned, I mean, imprisonment should come in. But these recommendations that are being provided are mainly targeted to reduce prison overcrowding and targeted at those that have not been convicted yet for crimes, for certain crimes. And those crimes that are petty or non-violent should be addressed in a different way as a means of reducing that prison overcrowding. So it's about political policies related to criminal justice system, which type of criminal policies you want to implement. I mean, tough measures against those that are most marginalized, discriminated, and those that are poor, or are we really looking into, in the case of drug-related offenses, are we really looking at the organized crime that is producing, distributing, and making gain from the drug trafficking, or are we going to penalize and imprison those that are abusing drugs? So it's a question of the criminal policies we want to implement in this regard. But of course, that incarceration has its role.
Thank you so much.
One point I would like to add to, because I think we have been trying, these developing countries have been trying to transform the prisons from retribution to reformation. You know, that is the rehabilitation and reformation of the. So far, it has not been successful, but that is the reason what we have seen in the courts, that a previous convict is disregarded by the court because if he has been tried and convicted in earlier case, there's a possibility that he will repeat the crime again. But I think the time has come that we should have an approach that after committing a crime, if somebody has passed a sentence, then of course what he had done, he has been punished for that. He has come back to his own normal life. Let's welcome him. Let's give him an opportunity to, adjust himself in the society. And I think for this, the psychiatrists and the psychologists, as you are, have to, guide the people that, as you say, it's not a genetic criminal background. It was a circumstance of society in which he was placed in, and unfortunately he fell victim of a crime, or then committed crime himself. So I think the society by and large has to be educated about these criminals who are, not to be hated, and they are to be adjusted.
Thank you so much, Justice Saab. We'll just take one last, very brief question.
Well, I think we don't have the suo motu powers of writing letters, but nonetheless, if some case comes before us or in my court, I will take note of it.
Okay.
Thank
you so much, sir. Sir, AIG Saab, if you'd like to respond to the question about the custodial discrimination, and then Sarah just to end.
This, what I think the general impression is in prison there is a discrimination. but there is a system of prisons internal accountability, and the staff is taken to task. It doesn't mean the prisoner inside Pakistan prisons are discriminated. There are the extensions. I don't say there is a utopian state. I'm not defending my organization, but we have the proper classification, proper treatment. If there is something is noted, then the system works. That is the PIDA. We have the PIDA Act there, and there is a disciplinary proceeding is the prison staff. This is the answer, but it is not saying that everything is okay, but it is not a utopian state. We have to improve a lot of things. One more thing which would I like to add, what the prison system have delivered. So this, especially to your questions, internationally it is generally recognized the prison doesn't work. It is not a pessimistic statement, but it is a realistic statement. So there is a research all over the world. The prison has not performed 100%, has not given the desired results. That's why we are switching over to the alternative to the imprisonment. That's why the prisons have been shifting from stringent attitude to reformation. One last thing, I agree with the Sarah. We have Prison Act 1894. And that is based upon prison committee's recommendation that was 1836. And what was the motive of that committee? Recommendation of the committee was that is based upon racism. That is, say the Indian prisoners have no potential to be reformed, and the prison should be used as a pungent machinery for those who commit the violence. This was the basic spirit, and our prison system, that is based upon the Prison Act 1894 under Section 59. We have the rules, but it doesn't mean that everything is not working well, but there is a lot of room for the improvement. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sarah, just briefly, so we can...
On discrimination, all over the world, it begins with poverty. Who goes to prison, how they get treated in jail, how do they get treated through the criminal justice system depends on your resources. So whether you're mentally ill, a drug addict or whatever, if you're a rich mentally ill person or a rich drug addict, you have access to services. So the first line of discrimination happens way before you go to prison. And prisons are just an end result or a manifestation of all of that inequality and discrimination. I would say you and women, write the rules. That was one of the points that I had in my thing in terms of to say to the activists, right? Do the research, compile the data, study the data, write the rules. The government has very little capacity to do this, and we have found at Justice Project Pakistan that when we've called in the experts, and actually, I mean, now I lament the fact that I didn't take statutory writing in law school, but I wish I had. Whenever we have written a policy or the rules, it provides the government at least a beginning from which to jump off of. And it actually instigates the change. And in Pakistan, the door opens, shuts a lot in your face, but sometimes there is a glimmer of hope. And if you have that thing ready, the chances of it making through are huge. So
that's what happened in Sense.
yeah,
And
write the rules. Don't wait for them. Write the rules. Give it to them.
And if the window
Great.
isn't open, it can be broken.
Yeah.
Sorry. Robina, 15 seconds, please, and then we have to end.
रिक्वेस्ट करूंगी कि जो बेल है एज अ पनिशमेंट जो है वो रिजेक्ट नहीं होनी चाहिए. एक ये अगर उनको जल्दी पे बेल मिल जाती है तो तब भी, और दूसरी मैं पता नहीं कितना ये काबिल अमल है जो इस पर मैं बात करने लगी हूँ कदीर आलम साहब से, कि जो कैदी सेंट्रल जेल से अगर डिस्ट्रिक्ट जेल मुंतकिल कर दिए जाएं तो जो एक जेल के ऊपर बर्डन है वो कम हो सकता है, क्योंकि सेंट्रल जेल में बहुत कैदी होते हैं, और अगर उन्हीं सेंट्रल जेल के कैदियों को, नॉट हवालातियों को, डिस्ट्रिक्ट जेल में मुंतकिल कर दिया जाए तो कम से कम जो कैदियों के लिए लिए गए अच्छे इकदाम है वो उनसे मुस्तफ़ीद हो सकेंगे. Thank you.
So thank you to everyone. Thank you to the esteemed panelists. Clearly lots more discussion, and hopefully, as Justice Saab said, next year maybe we'll be back to see what reforms have been made since then. Thank you to all of you as well. We can all resume watching of the match now, and the closing session as well. So watch the match on your phones. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.